All right,
Been ready.
there.
I hit a button. I'm a button pusher.
Recording here. Recording there. Recording
I
everywhere.
pushed a button.
Let's see. We are coming to the end of summer. It was hot. Did this summer go by quick for you? Like our cold opens have turned more into like old man minute. I remember back in the day when
it's called
summer
cold
seemed
open
last
because
4 months.
it's what we do, it's what we're gonna do before we're in the ground.
Yeah,
it's because we slowly start. We're feeling the life leech away from us.
But yeah, like August is already over. Where'd that go? Fall's going to be around the corner. What's your favorite season?
I mean, okay, here's the thing though: is like I primarily am an indoor creature, so. I mean, like, how much impact do seasons really have on you, aside from driving from one location to another?
So prior to a year ago, not much, because it's like what the shitty part was like when it's summertime, I got to mow. But since we moved out here where we've got like the more land, like right now we're kind of confined to the area that like we're not going to get like destroyed by ticks or bitten by a snake. But in the fall time and winter time, we kind of have more like free reign over the entire property because, not many ticks or snakes like the cold.
Does it bother you that your entire life is basically consumed with this battle that you have against Mother Nature?
I'm hoping. Well, and the bad thing is, so like if you have your property, you're like, well, we're going to get rid of all this tall grass. Like you can't mow it all. Especially like, because I mean, you got to clean every stick because if you hit it with your mower, it's going to destroy it. But then it's like, well, I'll just put down all these chemicals. And then guess what? Cancer.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to put this Agent Orange down. That should work, right? Yeah, I don't see why not.
I mean, it does.
Yeah. But then you're walking in it because it's like, this is great. My property's all open. What's that burning sensation?
I got 3 arms. This is fantastic.
But so we don't really like, because I had grand plans of doing that because my dad does that on his trail a little bit. But I think my goal is that we don't have as big of trail. So I'm hoping this winter we can kind of clean it up pretty well in like spring before it gets too crazy. And then we can just drive the mower through it. But
well, I guess I'm just saying, like, it's like you are in this constant war with Mother Nature and like you're going to lose. Ultimately. And so I guess the question I have is the question that all people would ask a soldier in a war. Why do you fight? Why do you fight, Sean?
I mean, you kind of keep the front at bay. So, you tinker away a little bit at it. And it does feel good, like when you're sitting on your porch and you look out at a spot that you've cleared up and you're like, that feels good. Like it feels like a good, hard day's work. It doesn't really amount to much except feeling like you accomplished something. But it's also like, I understand kind of what you're saying. It's like, well, if you didn't do that, what's the alternative? It looks about the same.
It grows. It just grows.
Yeah, it just grows. And then fall, it falls over, and wintertime it dies. And I think, man, maybe I should clean that up.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not. I guess I'm not. I guess I'm not trying to imply that what you're doing is ultimately futile. I guess I'm just asking, like that you elected this, like you chose this.
I mean, I've told Tiffany this. Like, she was the one that pushed really hard to move, kind of more out, like in the country. And I was like, all right, you want it so bad, we'll do it. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I've lived in the town for. It was like 13 years at that point. Like I've been domesticated, but if that's what you want, babe. And like the first month when it's like, I need to clean up some of that brush. And you get done after an hour, you're like, I need to clean up that brush. And you get back on the porch, you get a little sweaty, a little tired, a little sore. You drink a big glass of water or a beer and you're just like, that feels good. Like I tamed the land a little bit.
Okay. That's nice. That is nice. That sounds nice.
Yeah, I mean, like the alternative is like it's like, well, I could sit inside and play on my phone, which is fine, but I think I get a little bit more of like a self satisfaction by going out and doing that.
It's the same. I guess it's the same reason you make your bed in the morning. Do you make your bed in the morning?
Yep. When we did our,
it's the same reason you make your bed in the morning.
Yep. Like, it's a little task.
Are you ultimately like, yeah? At the end of the day, like, yeah, you're gonna rip it all up again, but you do it in the morning because, like, it just makes you, it's something that you do for yourself that makes you feel nice.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, because like you make the bed, you're going to tear it up. Like you trim up some leaves and stuff. Mother Nature's just going to try to come back even harder. And you know what you do afterwards, Richard? You just lay in bed and close your eyes, and you just drift off to sleep, and you dream. Yep.
You do everything you can to not mess up the bed because you know you're going to have to make it in the morning.
I stiff like a board.
Nobody move.
But Richard, I'm excited to talk about this. This is like one of like the 3 or 4 things that you've gotten me into that I like really, really like fell into hard. I'm excited to talk about it.
I know this is great. I feel like this has been my year. I'm like 2 for 2 at this point.
Yeah.
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good about it. I'm 2 for 2.
You're like, Sean, you know what you should try now? Heroin. I'm like, I don't know, man.
See, ultimately, you know what? I'm going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead. I know what we're going to do. We're going to open. We're going to cold open with a closing thought.
Okay.
And the closing thought is that at the end of the day, you should just listen to me because I know what I'm talking about. And that's how you start the show.
Well, that's all the bromance we have for this.
What's up, everybody? I'm Richard.
And I'm Sean.
And we are speaking the language of bromance. And today we are going to show you that I was right.
Oh, Richard. So, like I said in the cold open, there have been a few things. I'm trying to remember. I could probably name a few off the top of my head. I think I know 4 right away. Of things that you introduced me to that became like super strong passions of mine. And I just thought of this one, like very, very, very first thing that you ever got me hooked into was tabletop RPGs.
Yep.
You're like, hey, you should try this thing.
I forgot that was me.
Yeah, and I was like, I mean, maybe. And I like super enjoyed it. Star Wars, you kind of got me into that.
Yeah.
And the most recently, you said 2 for 2 this year, Destiny.
Yep.
Like I hooked into that like a bad STD. Like
you're playing it more than I am.
This season starting out, I am, but like last 2 seasons, you definitely played way more than I did.
There was stuff I was gunning for. So,
but Richard, this one, like you had mentioned it and talked about it, and it was kind of the same boat where it's like, okay, I'll get to it maybe, but like, how good can it be? And I watched the first episode of this, and like before I think I even got to episode 2 or 3, I had to go to the comic book shop anyway. Got the graphic novel. I'm like, this is like my new passion. This is something that I wish I had been a fan of or at least got into like years ago, but I'm glad I did now. What is it, Richard?
It's Sandman.
Oh, Netflix put out Sandman. I'm a big Neil Gaiman fan. I've read one, I guess I've only read one of his books, American Gods.
American Gods.
Loved it. But I opened this book. I watched this first episode, and oh man, Richard, this show, Neil Gaiman, like huge props to him. Like he's done what I wish George R.R. Martin had done with Game of Thrones, where he's like, I am not letting anybody make this unless it's made how I want it to. And to stick to those guns.
Because there have been so Sandman is a story was originally, I think Gaiman did the original story in 89.
That sounds right. Yeah, somewhere around there.
I think like 89 or 90 was when the original came out. And there have been talks of it being a movie slash never a television series. I didn't hear anything about it being a series until Netflix. But there have been talks about a Sandman movie since probably the early 90s.
Yeah,
and there were a lot of like false, like, I don't know about false starts, but there were like, there were talks that it was getting done. There were rumors about who was going to play Dream. There were, the more recent one I heard was the last time that there was talk of it being a movie. I think that was Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Okay, maybe a little bit.
Was the thought of being Dream, I think. Or his name was kind of up in the air with it the last time I heard like rumors or rumblings of it. And this was probably back in like I don't know, like the mid 2000s, maybe a little later. So anyway, the point is that it has been in some form of development hell / false starts for almost 30 years. So now we get it as a series, and funny enough, get it as a series on Netflix, not HBO Max.
Yes, we talked about that during the Comic-Con panel, because this came out, and I knew it was a DC comic, but I thought it was kind of like one of those offshoots that had nothing to do with the DC universe. But like you had said, like, oh, he's crossed over with this, crossed over with that. And in the comic book, like, they make references to like Batman and the Justice League and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But because Sandman was a character in DC prior to Neil Gaiman starting to write it. Like, he had come back in the 80s to, like, I guess that was like in maybe the 60s or 50s. And when he came around,
kind of reference in the series.
Yeah, which I kind of liked. And did you get a chance to listen to Neil Gaiman on WTF podcast?
I did.
Okay. That was really good, I thought. Like, so
just off the jump, I want to say that I am actually surprised that you were locked in after the first episode, because the entire first episode, our main character is in a fishbowl for the entirety of the first episode.
You don't even hear him talk, I don't think, or he might say like one or two words.
He doesn't even talk. He says he's got like a few lines in the first like 2 minutes, and then you don't hear a word for the rest of the episode. He is sitting naked in a fishbowl for 45 minutes. And that's your main character.
Well, and so I guess before we get too much into like spoiler territory, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to really say kind of about this. Like, yeah, like you said, it took 30 some years for it to get made. There was a lot of Neil Gaiman said there was a lot of bad movie proposals that he shut down. And to be honest, I don't know where this falls in kind of the I don't think this was popular enough for like WB and HBO Max to be like, oh, we got to capitalize on that, like Batman or something like that. Like, it was enough of an indie kind of feel that they're just like, well, what the fuck am I going to do with this?
Yeah, I think the thing that I heard was that HBO Max didn't get it when it was pitched to them. And I'm like, and to which I guess I'm just like, what do you mean you don't get it? Like, it's been around, it's been like a beloved comic since the early 90s. Like, even if you as an executive, if you don't get it, you have to like sit there and go, well, there's got to be something to it, because otherwise, like, why would it still be popular? Like, why would people still be talking about it since the 90s?
Well, and I mean, just have to look at comic book sales, right? Like, it's got backing. And honestly, it may be a good thing and maybe he was just too stubborn with it too. They're just like, we're not messing with this. Which again, I don't know how he had that much power on something like that that's owned by Warner Brothers and DC. Like, to me, that's impressive too, because a lot of times in those type of comic companies, when you write or do something, like, you lose all rights to it. But for some way he struck that deal.
Guess I think it was the way he initially like took over the Sandman IP when he wrote it, because I mean it's always been like his baby. Like, he's the one that's been, like. I think he he wrote it pretty much exclusively.
Yeah, but I mean, for that time frame in terms of comics and just how that stuff worked, and being one of his first works to have that kind of established power over it, that's, again, I think we're reaping the benefits of that now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's probably kind of the whole, like, I think it might be similar to like the kind of George Lucas thing where, he's structuring a deal to make a movie, and then the 20th Century Fox is like, well, we'll give you merchandising rights because nobody does anything with that.
Could be.
And George was like, okay, I'll do something with it. Fucking watch.
Oh, and here
I think
we are
this was
now.
probably DC was probably like, okay, well, you can have this, like, C-list, D-list fucking character from 30 years ago, and you can just have it and do whatever you want with it. Just publish it under our label.
Yeah, we just got to have a Batman reference in there and something else. And he's like, all right, whatever. But, so let's jump into it, Richard. Like you said, episode 1, our main character in this show is barely in this show at all, this first episode.
Well, I mean, he's in it. He just doesn't do anything.
True.
He just sits there in a literal fishbowl.
And what I love about this is this really
don't tap the glass fishbowl.
This set the tone for me for kind of what this show is going to be. Because like it's Netflix, right? Like, when they establish that he gets kidnapped, he gets trapped, I'm like, okay, the whole season is going to be about this, him getting out of this trap.
Uh-huh.
And right away, he's trapped, but then they start jumping forward a bunch, and they start, talking about different, like, nightmares escaping a little bit. Maybe, I don't remember if they talk specifically about the
No, you're
nightmares
thinking
escaping.
of the sleeping sickness.
Yeah, sleeping sickness was part of it. But, like, right away we're jumping the guy who kidnapped him, now he's super old, and then he dies, and now his son becomes super old. And, like, we have essentially, like, a whole story arc in one episode.
Yes.
And like I said, that set the tone for the series, because it's not like 10 episodes of one story arc. It is probably 10 episodes of at least 4 different story arcs that don't take the whole 10 episodes to finish. There's this one.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you've
him getting his stuff back.
Yeah.
The vortex.
You've got the first arc. You've got Doll's House. You've got, you've got the Doll's House, Rose Walker, yeah.
And I mean that, like, you've mentioned this outside of this, so this isn't my idea. Like, you talk, like, you could put Dream and you can make any kind of show around him. Like, he could be the main character. He's kind of a supporting character. Like, you could do anything with this. And I like that they didn't try to do one big thing. They did a lot of, like, really good small things that could have been stretched out big things, Netflix style.
And I think that was what attracted Neil to the comic, or to doing the comic, and to doing this kind of character specifically, is because this way he can essentially tell any kind of story he wants to tell, and it doesn't fall apart. Like, the story in it, like the overall setting and story kind of are structured so that way you can put anything in there and it doesn't seem out of place. It doesn't fall apart.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic, because again, you can literally tell any kind of story, and Dream can be the main character, Dream can be tertiary, and it still works. So for people that haven't watched the show, I guess the elevator pitch of this is that it is a story based on a comic about anthropomorphic personifications of primordial forces, which is a fancy way of saying that think of like intangible aspects and make them living tangible people.
Yeah, was it like where you make
think
human
of
things on
dreams
animals
as an actual person? What if there was a king of dreams? What would he look like? What would he do? How would he act? What if death was a person? Which I think we've all, had the, personification of death, the Grim Reaper with the scythe, Angel of Death, and all that. And so I would say that it probably isn't until episode 6 that you finally understand what the show actually is.
Well, again, going through it. So the first episode is him getting caught. 100 years pass. He, because Dream is, trapped. Nobody's having dreams. Some people can't sleep. Some people can't wake up. All kinds of stuff. And, right there, first episode, he escapes and he goes back to his kingdom, his dream kingdom, and everything's destroyed. And that's the first episode.
Yep.
And all of his stuff had got
all
stolen.
one episode.
And he had a pouch, he had a helm, and he had a ruby.
Yep.
And he had to go find all three. And so, like, after that first episode, we're like, oh, it's not a big escape. That's not what the show is. It's like this whole thing's going to be about him getting his 3 things back and fighting the big bad that had the gem. No, that's over in episode 5. And it was a good.
Okay. We were just talking about Dream can be a main character, Dream can be a tertiary character. In episode 5, he doesn't show up for the first 30, 40 minutes. You don't see him at all. He doesn't show up until the last 10 minutes of the episode.
Yeah, 24/7 we got to talk about. So I guess
first episode's that's the one I'm talking about. You don't see him until the last 10 minutes.
So the first episode's him escaping. Second episode, I just got the Wikipedia to try to remember, but he gets his pouch back.
He gets his pouch back. He goes, so episode 2, first thing he does is he needs to get some of his power back in order to approach the fates.
Yes. How's he got to get his power back Richard?
He goes and he finds something that he created in the dreaming, which is the name of his realm, his kingdom. And so he goes and he finds Gregory the Gargoyle.
Oh, and he goes up.
Which that's not how it went in the book. I don't know how far you are in the book.
I'm on issue 3 or 4, so I went through that part.
I don't remember Dream taking out Gregory in the book. At least not at first, not right off the jump.
Yeah, I don't remember what he went to see them for in the book. But so that scene open, if you're a dog or a cat person, or you like pets, it opens up there's this big gargoyle running around. There's these 2 brothers,
and he's got that cute face where they intentionally make him cute.
Yeah, he looks like a big,
oh, look at that little boy. Look at that guy.
Both of them are just super lovey on him. And he shows up and he's like, I got to take something. I got to get my power back. And the only way to do that is to take something I created. And I created Gregory. And they're like, no. He's like, I'm not asking you. I'm asking Gregory.
Oh, Gregory the Gargoyle.
Oh,
plus, how cool? I don't know. I just like Gregory the Gargoyle. I just like saying it. It's just something you like saying.
What I liked about that too is it's Cain and Abel, and you're like, is it that Cain and Abel? And right after Gregor gets taken, whack. You're like, yep, that's that Cain and Abel.
That's that Cain and Abel. Nope, that's what it is.
Yep. But so yeah, he had to do all that to figure out where's my stuff, because he talks to the three sisters.
Because he uses the power he has from Gregory to go through the dreams of other people to collect offerings for the fates.
Yeah, because you got to get like a snake and a couple other things. Snake was the main one I remember.
Yeah, yeah. Which, I mean, I always love that part where he's like, I have to navigate through the dream. So like he's pulling shit from the dreams of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's in everybody's dream at once and he's, like taking what he needs. I always like that part.
I kind of like, so like, you think about these things that were stolen, and I think it's easy to interpret that whoever took it for like nefarious reasons. And like the first thing that you jump off of is this pouch of his sand.
Yep.
And it went from like a couple different people. And this is where we meet Joanna Constantine, which is basically a play on John Constantine.
Yep.
Which I kind of forgot about.
In the comic, it was John.
Yeah. Yeah. In a very similar.
It was John, but obviously we can't put John Constantine in the Netflix show.
Yeah. WB's
so
like,
we're going to do Joanna, which kind of works because Joanna Constantine was in Sandman just 300 years ago.
Which she was in this too, which they didn't really talk much about.
Right.
But in the book, it was a very similar storyline. So she had it, left it somewhere, apparently somehow with her girlfriend, I guess. And
an ex-girlfriend, of course.
And apparently, Richard, if you've got the sand of the Sandman and somehow you get that thing open, you never want to wake. And basically, you're stuck in a dream world forever. Just hanging. I don't even know if you're technically alive, but you're there. And, I kind of love the like visuals of this too, because like Joanna walks in and you could tell she still has feelings for her girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, and they kind of have like, she looks fine. There's this whole embrace, and then I can't remember exactly how it happened, but she comes to realization of like, oh, we're in a dream. I'm in your dream kind of thing, and you see what she is. It's bedridden, like emaciated, like just skin and bones.
Yep.
And I think what I like too about Morpheus is you see this here's like you see compassion from him here, where he like, because in the first episode you didn't see compassion, right? When he got out,
because he's been trapped for 100 years, and so okay, I mean, sorry to backtrack, but is not the coolest, like the most badass like scene? I guess by scene I mean just shot. The most badass shot in the entire series is when Dream finally breaks out of his prison, and the old guy who was a young guy is now an old guy, has a dream and is following this cat, and then the cat jumps up on this chair, and then all you see is like the little like pinpoint whites of Dream's eyes, and everything else is shrouded in black.
That's one of my favorite shots. Like even in the comic, that's a great shot.
Best shot in the entire series.
But like that, it was a kid whose dad was the one that kidnapped him. And it was kind of like if you catch a tiger by its tail type of thing. Like you don't want to let it go because it's going to attack you. And so this kid who was a boy when all this happened is stuck in that same kind of boat. It's like, well, I can't let this thing out because what if it kills me? It's like, just promise you won't kill me. And he's like, well, I can't let you out unless you promise me that. And he gets out, and what happens? Well, Dream kills him. It puts him in like an endless sleep type of thing.
Endless sleep.
And so like there you see like, well, he could have showed compassion and been like, I'm gonna let you die, but you're at fault for this. But here, same thing. Like this person stole his stuff, kind of, but he allowed her a more peaceful death instead of kind of
Joanna kind of convinced him, which. So little Easter egg for this is that they go in is that Joanna has a nightmare, and her nightmare is of what's referred to in the Hellblazer comic, and also like one of the profound like key moments in Constantine's life is the Newcastle incident, which is the first time anybody's ever seen it like in a live action setting, in a non-comic setting.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And the Newcastle incident was John was trying to save a little. John tries to save a little girl, and the little girl ends up getting pulled into hell.
Yeah, I mean that scene was pretty tough to watch.
That was and like that was a pivot. Like that was a huge thing in the Hellblazer comic, and that's the first time we've ever seen it in animated or live action. Because I don't think they've even done the Newcastle incident animated.
Yeah, so he works through that, gets the pouch, and now he has to find his helm. And his helm was purchased by a demon and is currently sitting in hell.
Yep. So now he's got to go to hell with his newfound buddy, Matthew the Raven.
Yeah, so I told you about this, but like Patton Oswalt's the voice of the Raven.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say he's as much as like, I don't feel like he's really acting per se. It's just kind of Patton Oswalt like here, which is fine. But my son's been watching these Minecraft movies, and Patton Oswalt voices one of the characters. So if like whenever I blink or look away or he's off screen, like I'm waiting to see like a Minecraft character pop up.
I think in the audiobook, I think Andy Serkis does the voice for Matthew.
Oh, cool.
In the audiobook.
That wouldn't be bad.
No.
But yeah, it seems like a good choice. It's like I said, it doesn't seem like it's acting as much as him kind of reading it, but maybe he'll kind of get into it for season 2 some. Like, again, if I had any complaint about it, it would have been that. And that's not even something that, like, if I'm writing a review, I'm not putting that down. Like, I'm not saying, Patton Oswalt was the worst part of this movie. It's like just a little hang up because of something else outside of all of this.
Yeah. He reminds me of this shit my son watches.
Yeah.
Drives me crazy. Like, 0 stars.
If I'm like just thinking off the top of my head to recast that part though, like Kevin Smith or like Jason Mewes would have been kind of interesting in that spot.
Funny enough, Kevin Smith actually does do a voice in the audiobook.
Oh, cool. Which one does he do?
He does the voice of Merv Pumpkinhead in the audiobook.
Ooh. Which that voice in this one sounded familiar. Was he somebody I should know?
Yes, it is somebody you should know, Sean. It's Luke,
I don't know. Is he like
Skywalker.
Somebody from the stars? Yeah. Yeah. When I heard that was great. So we go to hell. He has to get his helm back. So he has a challenge with Lucifer Morningstar, played by Brianna Tarth from Game of Thrones.
Yes. Gwendolyn Christie?
I think that sounds right. Well casted.
Okay. Just to preface, like, how great is the casting for this entire show? Like, do you not feel like like everybody that was cast for the roles that they did is exactly who they should have been cast for?
Yeah, I'd say like 99%
really think
of it.
Better people to play the people that they were playing.
I mean, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say like if like the only quip would be like maybe a different Matthew the Raven, but like again, like who they casted was the right casting for it in terms of like if they're not going to do like Brad Pitt for the Matthew the Raven, like that would be a horrible casting. But yeah, like, and I haven't heard too much of like because they had talked about in that podcast, you know, like I haven't heard a lot of people complain about like, oh, it's Joanna Constantine. Why didn't they make a man John Constantine? Or like, oh, they made Lucifer a woman. Why didn't they make it a man? Yeah. Like I haven't really heard any of that. And what they had done apparently is when they went through all this, because he wrote it in the 80s and he probably wrote from a place that he knows. So like if you go through that, it's a lot of white dudes, I assume. I mean, from what I've looked at so far, I think that's pretty much all it is.
Well, and again, he's also like You know, like Constantine, for example, like he's pulling, like that's a DC character.
Yeah,
like he
good
can't.
point, yeah.
He can't put John Constantine in his show because he hasn't owned that character.
Yeah,
Joanna, he has more liberty with because that's in his book and nowhere else.
Well, and like the librarian in the book is like an old white dude. And, well, you know, it's like I would assume if I was writing in the 80s, I'm like, I need somebody that's kind of like a butler. Oh, it's kind of like an Alfred. Oh, okay, we'll make it look kind of like Alfred. So it's going to be like an old white dude.
Yeah.
But what they did apparently is they sat back and they said, okay, let's go through all these characters and see if they, you know, does it matter if they're male or female? Like, what can we do to change that makes it still work? Like he said with Lucifer, he's like, listen, like if anybody's complaining that it's a female, if you look at like later comics with him in it and he's naked, there's nothing there. It's not a male or female. It's completely barren.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like I thought she was perfect in that. You know, Vienna Akampong, I think, was the librarian. I thought she was great. The Corinthian I thought was really good too. Boyd Holbrook.
Desire.
Yeah. Desire. So do you know how they got the actor for Desire?
I do actually. They put out a thing on Twitter, right?
No, I guess Neil Gaiman their name is Mason Alexander Park.
Yes.
And reached out to Neil Gaiman and said, "Hey, I don't know if I hear they're making this. If you've cast anything, I would want to be Desire." Apparently, they got a Desire tattoo, all kinds of other stuff. And so Neil Gaiman, I don't know what it was that triggered him or made him think because I mean I'm sure he gets inundated with if you're gonna do a Sandman, I should be Dream, and I'm sure he gets tons of those, but something made him kind of click around and look, and they're actually
I
an actor.
threw messages, DMs. I'm like, I'll be Dream. That's fine.
And apparently it's we should try this out, and it worked. And yeah, it was a perfect casting when you consider Desire. What was the one that was with Desire? What was
Despair?
Despair. Great casting on that too. We didn't get much of her.
So I was watching it with my wife, and when Despair was on, she was like, "Huh?" And I said, "What?" And she was like, "Despair's wearing Crocs." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "I don't know. It's just the one thing I noticed." And so I paused it. And so now it should be made perfectly clear that Crocs are the shoes of despair.
It's not wrong.
I mean, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Desire really didn't have a ton to do in this season, but was really pivotal to a lot of the stuff that happened. So, I guess
they're really kind of the
antagonist.
I mean, they are the antagonists, but they're more like the Machiavellian kind of antagonist rather than direct confrontation, which we get in the Corinthian.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, and we'll get to the collectors. Oh my gosh. Let's see. So, battle to get the helm. They have almost like a battle of wits. Then Dream wins, gets his helm. And that leads, so kind of the backstory of what happened with the Ruby. So there's a lady that was kind of married to the guy that trapped Dream, got pregnant.
Yes.
He was like, get rid of that baby. She's like, nope, steals all the stuff and leaves. That Ruby gives him power, drives the kid mad. He grows up, goes in the insane asylum, escapes. And that's where we get, and I'm open to spending quite a bit of time on this. Episode title 24/7. His name is John. He goes into a local diner, and probably one of the most disturbing things I've ever watched in my life.
Is it because they're sticking with? Is it because they were kind of sticking with? Did you feel like since they were sticking with the one place and the very self-contained kind of story and and just the slow, you knew it was the whole time, that everything is going to go somewhere bad. And so you're just kind of sitting and waiting for it.
There's slow build up, and maybe disturbing is not the right word. I think it's more unnerving because he sits there and like you're waiting for him to just like snap his fingers and everybody's head blows off, or you're waiting for him to.
But no, that tension's just getting like pulled tighter and tighter and tighter.
And it's the big cliche of like, well, what if you couldn't lie? And at first it's like good, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to tell people how I really feel and do this and do that. And slowly it starts moving into like just horrific things. And it always ends up in everybody dying. And Richard, I'll tell you the part that like, I guess the disturbing part was this moment. So setting the scene. So there's a waitress and there's a cook. And apparently, like, she kind of likes him, and he's come over to her house a couple times. And I didn't catch the age of her son. So when I first heard what he said, like,
ooh, yeah.
I was like, oh, this went like a really dark spot.
Yeah.
So she was talking about like, hey, why don't you come over tonight and we can watch a movie? He's like, well, no, I don't want to. Well, before they can't lie, he asked like, well, is your son going to be there? And so I was thinking like he's an absentee father, like, he's trying to like fill in some kind of role that's missing. But when they can't lie, she comes in and says like, well, why don't you come over, yada, 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 or whatever. He's like, well, usually when I come over and you go to sleep, I go up to your son and I start fucking him. And sometimes he starts fucking me. And he's like, oh, and he doesn't say the age, but he's like, when I was that age, I didn't know, like, he knows things that I didn't know. And so in my head, I'm thinking like it's a kid, and I was like, like you talk about like triggering things, and that kind of like triggers like emotions. Sure. But then she had talked about he was a college kid, so he was of age. And
he's 20. He's like 21,
22, something like that. And this guy's probably like 40 or something. I mean, still probably a pretty big age gap, but not like we're staying out of like the rapey territory. And then they cut back to like some other stuff where it's almost like it's rewind, and she talks about him again and going to college, and like I kind of had like a calming over me. It's like, oh, okay, it was all consensual. Like it wasn't what I originally thought. But even just how he like delivered it, like it was kind of cold, and like it was almost like there's no emotion to it.
Very matter of factly.
Yeah. And like this girl, like this woman, like kind of likes him and like wants a man in her life. And it's like he's using her to, kind of have this like secret relationship with her son. And of course, all hell breaks loose, like the two chicks are starting to get it on. Then the two guys are starting to get it on. And then the CEO and the new hire are getting it on. Then they all see each other getting it on, and they get mad and want to kill each other. And then they're all killing each other. Oh. So what did you think of that like episode? Like again, I think that's one that a lot of people talked about.
I mean, I would say that the 24/7 is definitely like I feel like 24/7 is like the gate, is kind of like a gate where if you get through 24/7, if you watch 24/7 and you're not like completely turned off with the show, then that's I feel like 24/7 is kind of like a barrier of entry in terms of like if you watch 24/7 and you like the show, then you're going to look at 24/7 and be like, that was a really good episode. Like that was a really cool episode. If you watch it and you're like, that was completely disturbing, unnerving, triggering, that was terrible. And I like, that's where the people that, that wanted an excuse to leave, like that's their excuse.
I could see it. But what I like about that episode though, too, is it doesn't feel like it uses all that stuff for shock value. Like you'd kind of said, it's all very matter of fact.
Yes.
And it all plays on the cliche of like, well, what if somebody was really trying to help people by getting rid of like almost human nature, and even then, like, it's not really lying to me. Like, it's because like if you couldn't technically lie, like there are like times like, if you get upset with somebody, you might feel something. And so you'll say something. So it's technically the truth, but it's not really how you feel.
Yeah. I mean, and like, I mean, you can go into like truth and perception and perception of truth. And But the interesting, okay, so we were talking earlier about, like what this show is. Like, you don't see Dream until the last 10 minutes of this of 24/7.
And again, with like when you think typical Netflix shows, he shows up, you're like, okay, they're going to meet off, something's going to happen, and then we got 5 more episodes for these two to meet again for the big battle. And what happens?
He doesn't get his ruby. So there's that. He doesn't get it. Instead, the ruby gets crushed.
Mm-hmm. Which was actually better.
Yeah, that's actually the benefit. That's actually a good thing, because then Dream gets his power, gets the ruby's power back.
Yep, and he holds John in his hand as he has all of his power back, and puts him in a long sleep. And that's it.
He just puts him to sleep.
And that's episode 5. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought this was going to be the season.
Yeah, you're only halfway done there, bud.
Yeah.
And then we get to my personal favorite episode, and what I feel episode 6 explains to you exactly what the show is.
I agree.
Like earlier when we were talking about like you can do anything with this show, episode 6 exemplifies that, perfectly.
Yeah, episode 6 is an episode that I'm going to go back and watch like once a year, just out of the blue.
Oh, it's so good.
Like if you talk about
combines a couple stories actually, because I think the Hob Gadling stuff doesn't happen until a little bit later. But it's cool that they put them together. That they put the bits with Death and Hob Gadling. It's cool that they put those together because it shows how the two stories are linked.
Yeah, it kind of felt like it could have been 2 separate episodes.
Yes.
I'm glad it was one, but it kind of felt like, those 2-sided comics where you read one half, then you got to turn it around, flip it upside down, and you can read the second half.
Yes. And the whole time you're still wanting more. But so this episode shows you that Dream is obviously not the only anthropomorphic personification around. We get to meet Death.
So the things you're talking about, they're called the Endless, and
Yes.
it's death, delirium, desire, despair, destiny, destruction, and our main character Dream.
Yep. And so Destiny is always pictured as an old man. Desire you see, despair you see. And during the show, so a lot of people don't know this, people that have watched the show but don't read the comic. They mention a couple times throughout the series, they mention somebody called the Prodigal. How they're like, oh, is the Prodigal still missing? Has there been any word on the Prodigal? They're actually talking about Destruction, because Destruction, at one point, Destruction decided that he did not want to do what he was made to do, and walked away, and nobody can find him. So Destruction's walked away from his duties, nobody can find him. And so that's who they refer when they're talking about the Prodigal. They're talking about Destruction. So Destruction is missing in the comic. Destruction is looks like a big dude with a big ginger red beard and ginger hair. Again, it's just another little Easter egg, but I'm sure that's something that people Google while they're watching the show.
Yeah.
They're watching the show and they keep talking about the Prodigal. Who the fuck is the Prodigal? Who is, there you go. I've answered the question. So that way they're talking about Destruction. Okay. So episode 6, you get to see Death. Now I liked who they cast for Death. I think that the casting for Death, pitch perfect. In the comic, Death was every goth guy's fantasy girl. If you like, I think they've done an animated version of Death in or the DC, the DC Comics version of Death. I think there is one animated story that has Death in it. But this is the first time obviously the first time you get to see a live action Death in Sandman. And is this not how you want Death to be?
Yeah. So the first scene where she shows up with the older violinist, and
yes.
What's interesting is like I haven't got to this point in the comics yet, but Neil Gaiman had talked about like people coming up to him and be like, "Hey, I just lost my dad or I lost my mom, and like I've been really struggling with it." And after reading, basically the Sound of Her Wings, issues, like it really helped me get through it. Like that's how I hope it was. And yeah, I mean, because like in all like. We see that scene, and I watched it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like that's a very powerful scene. And when you watch that episode, because she goes to like 5 or 6 different people, and the first one's the older guy. So like most deaths, like it was an older guy, right? You're like, okay, he's dying of old age. Like that's that's a scary thing to happen, but it was a very touching moment. Like she shows up, he sees her, he realizes who she is, he says his prayer. And then he's dead. And he's like, well, now what? Like, I'm dead. She goes to a gunshot victim. I'm trying to remember who. There's a couple
guy
other
that's
ones.
on his honeymoon.
Was that what it was? Was he honeymoon? I know he was swimming.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one was tough too because like he sees her. Like it's always like like you said, like that's how you want death to be because it's kind of like you realize what's happening, but there's no fear. Like, and in his instance, like that's kind of probably what I'd be like. He's like, wait a minute, I need more time because like my stuff's on her phone. Like, she needs me for this, she needs me for that, and it wasn't there. And then you hear like the screaming and everything. The one that like when it just showed up, and you're just like, oh no. They walk into a house, they see a mom by a crib, and mom's playing with the baby. You hear the cooing. And mom's like, I'll be right back.
Did you think she was there for the mom?
No, I knew she was there for the baby.
Yeah. Okay. I can't remember. You'll have to tell me because I don't remember. You'll have to tell me when you get to it. I can't remember. I think the baby talked in the comic.
They kind of made it sound like so Death walks up, picks up the soul of the baby, and the baby kind of coos and says some things, and she talks back to it. So, like, there was baby talk going on that she could understand. But like as she's walking away, you hear the mom come back in and like that scream and like, it's just kind of like like if this was like really what that scenario was, it's like you're dead, you're moving on, you're like, okay, like I'm kind of at ease with this. But the living world is still like completely not ready for that person to be gone.
Right.
But when you look at like you see people pass away, like, yeah, this is exactly what I hope it's like.
And you have Death saying like, I realize that, all people really need is a kind word and a friendly face.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's true. That's actually true. Like in the event like something like that happened, like, yeah, that's exactly what I would want.
Yeah.
I don't need, like big fanfare or everything, but just like somebody to be like, hey, so this happened and it'll be all right.
Yeah.
And we're going to go and figure the rest out. And you're like, okay.
And she's like, don't worry, I'm taking you to the most horrible place you'll ever experience for the rest of eternity. Wait, what? But yeah, beautiful episode. And then it cuts into Hob, which was a guy who in like medieval times at a bar said, I'm never going to die.
I've always loved the story of Hob Gadling, which Hob Gadling, if I remember, I think Hob Gadling is like throughout the comic series. Like he pops in and out quite a bit in the comic.
I hope he comes back in here.
I loved Hob Gadling.
Because it's interesting with him because the idea is you think that at some point he's going to be begging to die because it's just he's going to be tired of living. And he's like, no, I love life. Like even at like, because he starts
That's
out.
what I love. Just like the unbridled, like, no,
Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm good. Yeah, because he's kind of like like lower class, kind of like bar going guy. And, when he comes back, he's a little bit better off, and then he gets a little better off. And then all of a sudden he comes back and he's like in the worst shape ever. He's like, I think they said he was a witch or something.
Well, just the fact that like Dream is fucking like fascinated with him, like that first, so, Hobbs in the bar and he's like, I'm never going to die. And then Dream is like, why the fuck would anybody say that? Why would somebody not want to die?
Mm-hmm.
And Death's like, well, you could find out. I could grant him his wish and he could never die. And then, and Dream's like, well, if you do that, like, I guarantee in 100 years, like, he's going to be begging for death. And then he talks to him and he's like, well, we'll meet here again in 100 years and you see what you think. And the dude thinks he's like, just like being an idiot. And he's like, okay, yeah, 100 years. Sure. So then 100 years go by and he's like, are you a devil? Are you a demon? And he's like, no. He's like, you're just going to tell me, what it's like. And like, he stops and he's like, it's fucking brilliant. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, the only part that I kind of felt like you might, and they didn't really play on this, was when he'd lost like his wife and son and stuff, because he did start a family like in his 300 years.
Yeah,
and
after,
because that's kind of the whole vampire.
He says, like, I've hated every last moment of the last 80 years. He said, I've hated every single second because, like, his son died so he had a kid, he had a wife and a kid, and he had all this money. And then after the next 100 years, he goes to see him, and he's lost all his money. His son died in like a tavern brawl.
That's right.
His wife died, and like he looks like he's a beggar on the streets. Like he's got nothing, literally nothing. And so Dream's like, well, obviously now, like you're ready to die, right? And he's like, fuck no.
I've got so much to live for.
Death's a mugs game. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, we get to see him like in the 80s too when Dream doesn't show up.
Yeah.
And because they had a fight in 1880 because basically they like Hobb is like, I think you wanted a friend, and Dream's like, fuck you, I don't need friends.
I don't need friends. I'm emo. I'm emo before they even knew before they invented the word.
Hobb yells at him like, I'll be here in 100 years because that's what friends do. And then what happens? Dream's cat. And like, so we've like, there's been so much stuff that's happened. It's only been like 6 episodes. And when he says that and you're like, you start doing the math in the years, you're like, oh, he was trapped in that time. Oh my God, go back to your friend. Because in 1980, he was trapped.
He's not going to make it because he's in a fishbowl.
But yeah, he doesn't make
it. But doesn't it? I thought that would give you a little relief because it's not like, oh, he's irredeemable, and he it's not that he didn't want to hang out with his friend. It's that he couldn't because he was trapped in a fishbowl. That's why he didn't go hang out with his friend.
Because you get all that. Like if you see the comic or read the comic, you realize that. But like after he talks with Death, he talks about going to his meeting, and he goes to where the bar is. And it's like all like boarded up and everything, and then they go to the flashback. So at that point, after 1980, they cut back, and you see like crude arrows saying "new bar" or "new inn."
Yeah, the new inn.
Who's sitting there waiting for him? Hobb,
it's his old buddy Hobb Gatling.
Yep. And that episode kind of runs the gamut, but it's kind of like the whole. Like when you don't see friends for a long time and then you finally see each other and it's just like no time has passed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, also Will Shakespeare and Joanna Constantine are both in this episode.
And I'm assuming that's the same Joanna Constantine?
Yes, that is the Joanna Constantine that's in the comic.
Well,
But
that's the
then
same.
I think she also shows up again in the comic.
Was she the same one?
Actually,
That,
Dream refers to it because the next time he's talking to Hob, he says, I ran into her again and she did something for me and she did really well.
but that's the same one that we saw in this show, right? So the one from the 1780s is the same as the one from 2021.
No, different. No, different.
Okay.
Just same name.
Okay. So some kind of like lineage type thing.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, and that's so you basically have like episode 1 is self-contained. Episode 2 through 5 is one arc. Episode 6 is its own arc. And now you have kind of our next run of story starting with the Vortex.
Yep. The Dream Vortex, Rose Walker, and the Doll's House.
God, there is so much like if you love story, like beginning, middle, end arcs, like this series just like I love vignette style TV series like Black Mirror, there's other ones out there, but things that are like very self-contained.
Yes.
Like I love that. And that's what you're getting in this series. And I think that's one of the reasons I like love this show so much. Not only is it really, really good, but does that very well.
Yes. I feel like I've been talking everybody's head off. So you can run us through the last 4. So 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah. So, I mean, really we see this girl and her brother, and her mom's basically leaving their dad because her dad's, abusive and a horrible person. And she leaves, can't take her brother. And we kind of cut back a few years and she's trying to find her brother. And she gets a phone call from a lady, or somehow she gets contact with a lady, Unity from Britain.
Yes.
And
Unity Kincaid.
We find out that Unity Kincaid is the great grandmother. But Richard, she's been asleep for like 100 years.
Yeah.
She looks good for her age, though.
Looks fantastic.
But apparently while she was asleep, somebody snuck in, did some dirty business, and she got pregnant with Rose Walker's grandma, who then had her
Rose
mom.
Walker's mother.
Well, no, because I thought that was her great-grandma.
I thought it was just her grandmother. Maybe. I honestly don't remember.
I could be. Yeah, Rose's biological great-grandmother.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's what this is. Which, like, you think her age and years-wise, because she would have been 114. Or like 108. Yeah. Like, she would have been old.
Yeah.
But, like, she's going to basically help her out to get this whole thing so she can save her or find her brother. Her brother's in a really bad, like, foster home. And he's dreaming that he is, like you said, there's a good throwback. He's dreaming that he is a superhero that goes by the name of Sandman.
Yep.
That one of the nightmares is helping. Which that's we
didn't even get into that though. That there are rogue dreams wandering around the waking world, and so Dream needs to find them and bring them back to the dreaming.
Yeah, there's Corinthian, who's kind of the big bad.
Galt. Galt is the one that's with Rose Walker's brother,
Jed. And like that
Fiddler's
one was
Green.
Fiddler's Green. Jed was or that one that was with Jed was very kind of like sad because like she's trying to like give him like these dreams that are very like help him escape from what he has to deal with in the living world.
Escaping / empowering.
Yeah. And, when Morpheus finally catches her, because he kind of used Rose and Jed to capture her. And that's where, like, you see this whole gamut of Morpheus dream. It's like he's got some compassion, then he's got some, like, backstabbing. He's got some, like, only cares about himself kind of thing. I haven't watched the last 2 episodes, but like you said, in one of those, it's like horror movie dream. Like, it's just like his character has so much
we haven't even
range.
Talked about that,
which I haven't seen him yet, so we probably can't talk too much about him. But yeah, so she's on the search for her brother. Corinthian is also on the search for her and her brother because he's trying to get a hold of the vortex.
He wants control over the dream vortex. Which, let's talk about how cool the Corinthian is just as a villain. He has mouths for eyes, Sean. Like, how is that nightmare. Not pulled straight out of your nightmares?
And what you're learning is essentially like he's created serial killers.
Yeah.
Which that was a whole of its own creepiness. I think you find out about that in like episode 9 or episode 8, where there's a group of people who are starting this like conference. They're talking about like the Corinthian.
It's a serial killer convention, Sean.
Which at first it's kind of like, are they serial killer enthusiasts? And it's like, no, they all are serial killers. And like I'd mentioned, like the one guy in 24/7, like you thought he was hurting kids. You're like, oh, thank God he's not. And then they cut to that episode where they're talking about getting their keynote speaker, the Corinthian, and it's like a fat, chubby guy drinking like a Kool-Aid packet. And he talks about like the waiter, and the one girl's like, he's too old for you. And like all the creepy crawls you could ever have in your life, just.
Yeah.
And you think that's bad, but he says something in episode 9 that's even worse, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But so Corinthian decides to do this. He finds Jed first, kills the horrible foster dad and the mom who was trying to help him, which was sad.
Yep.
And decides to go to this collector conference and tells
collector conference, which is a serial killer convention. So I listened to, I can't remember who. I think it was Kevin Smith who was talking about, you know, his opinion of the series. And one thing he mentioned that kind of stuck with me was he was like, the serial killer convention, how has no one stolen that idea for 30 years? Because it was, you know, because it's in the comic, and the comic came out in, you know, the 90s or, you know, late 80s, early 90s. He's like, how has no one taken that idea and put it in something else?
That's a good idea. I mean, you could essentially do like a 5-episode vignette. Like basically you have like your conference.
The serial killer convention. Like they have panels.
Yeah, well, like they all show up and like
monetize, like how to monetize.
Yeah, they had the religious side of one. They had the women in power. They had the how to monetize. Like we don't do it for the money.
Like every almost like trope you see from every like conference you've been to in your entire life, but it's serial killers. Like I heard that and I was like, you know, he's right. Why has no one ever done that before?
Yeah, I'm kind of. It feels like a horror movie or a horror series in its own right. But like they talk about, it's like we don't shit where we eat. Yeah. And then there's a guy who's not really a serial killer, and they find out about it, so they kill him. Apparently, Corinthian knows all the serial killers somehow.
Yeah, he knows all of them, or at least knows some of them.
Yeah. But the thing that the I can't remember what his like Fun Park, I think his nickname was. Yeah. The guy who apparently was murdering children. He talks about, he's like, oh yeah, I always go to like, he's just sitting there with a juice box, like talking to another guy, like just like you would like with another podcaster at a podcast conference. You're just like, oh yeah, I use this kind of mic. And but he's sitting there, he's like, oh yeah, I always like to go to this park because, you know, there's always these kids that get lost and they're always just looking for a friendly face. And there's so many places.
You know what park he's talking about, right? We like he doesn't say it, but we know.
Yeah. And he's like, you know, and you there's so many like, you know, places you can take them to get away from everything, and like nobody can catch them, and they just only need a friendly face to see. He's like, you know what? In worst case, if you can't find one, you can have fun on the rides. And you think about like they talk like about serial killers and stuff, where it's just like that's just nothing to them, and it's like, oh, I mean, I could have, you know, I didn't get to murder anybody, but I got McDonald's, so it was a great day.
Yeah. Dear Diary.
Glass half full. Not with human blood, but with a slushie.
Oh, well.
But again, so like, you know, Morpheus finally shows up here. They have a little battle. Wasn't even really like a super like intense battle.
No,
I kind of like
just
that.
kind of like he was just kind of talking. It was just like, you know, everybody they were just kind of saying their piece.
Yeah, and the vortex kind of helps in a little bit. And so Corinthian gets destroyed. He kept his head. That was kind of neat. Kept the skull, like he's going to try to remake him.
Yes. At some point, he's not sure. He's not sure like how, but I think he was saying that he wants. He has ideas, but he's, you know, he wants to redo it as a nightmare, just different.
Yeah. But as he's talking to this room of serial killers, he kind of like imposes on them like to actually feel for what they did.
Yes.
And I don't know if they were blinded by Corinthian or if he like unlocked some kind of like part of their soul, but like each of them,
I think, you know, if you talk about psychopathy, the main trait of psychopathy is there's no emotion. There's no emotion to anything that they do. They act, everything is not necessarily done in a malicious way, but everything is done from a completely unempathetic, unfeeling, uncaring way.
yeah.
That's just how a psychopath operates. They have no empathy or emotion to anything or anyone. That's why they are comfortable with the things that they think and feel and do.
So you imagine,
and so, yeah, imagine that all of a sudden, like somebody that has done terrible things and has no regard for anything in deference to it, and all of a sudden they are given the gift, I put in air quotes, of getting to feel all of the feelings that would happen if a normal person had done the things that they have done.
yeah. And you've got the one lady calling 911 to confess. The hunter just pulls out a pistol and just blows his brains out. And like walking out of that, it was like walking out of Marley and Me, except, you know, more horrific. Everybody's like, oh no. But yeah, so that ends, and kind of like, you know, because basically there's the big showdown between the Vortex, Rose, and Dream, because she could bring down everything, and he's got to kill her. And what happens is her grandmother, who was supposed to be the Vortex, but because she was asleep, it passed on, pulls that from her and becomes the Vortex. And since she's, you know, 114 at this point, Dream kind of peacefully lets her pass on.
Yes. But also finds out how Unity Kincaid had children.
Yes. Because she remembered.
Which ultimately reveals the plan that Desire had set in motion so long ago, because Desire is Rose Walker's great grandfather.
Yeah. Unity talks about how she saw orange eyes, I think.
Gold
eyes. And the only gold. Oof.
Yeah. And so the thing is that in the event Dream killed Rose Walker, then he technically would have spilled family blood, since Rose is related to Desire.
And that's
Rose
kind of
is a child of the Endless.
And that's a big endless no-no, is spilling.
It's a big endless no-no. So that's why Desire did it in the first place.
Yeah, and so that's
just to fuck with Dream.
Yeah, Dream shows up, basically, and it seems like Desire couldn't overpower Dream. Like, Desire has to kind of like outsmart Dream, I think, is kind of the gist I got.
Yeah, because like, okay, so think in terms of like power level, I would say that Dream is definitely over Desire. Like the big three are Destiny, Dream, and Death.
And we only saw in this Despair, Death, Dream, and Desire, right? Those are the only ones we saw.
Right.
But do all seven play a part in the Sandman comics? Or are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So in the event there is a season 2, from what I understand, in the event they do a season 2, then they're going to touch on the storyline called Season of Mists, which introduces like a whole bunch of shit. Like you want to talk about any story you can tell, they start heaping on everything in Season of Mist. You see like Norse gods and
cool.
And Lucifer and the other Endless. I think it starts off as a dinner party with the Endless.
So it's definitely way after the fact, but there is a run in the new TMNT comic series from IDW. And they kind of play on like this family of like kind of super beings that kind of have the same kind of rules. And like just as you're mentioning it feels like they kind of pulled it and twisted it in their own way.
I could see that. Cool. That's kind of cool. The one thing we didn't talk about, which totally hit me by surprise. The only way I found out about it was I read a tweet. They added an 11th episode like a month after the fact.
Oh, is it just? I thought it was 2 separate ones, but it's one episode with 2.
It's 2 separate, stories, but it's one episode.
Yeah,
but they just added it. They're just like, oh, here, by the way, there's this thing.
So it was number 1 for like a couple weeks, and it dropped to like 5, and then they dropped that one back up to 1.
Netflix has never done.
No,
because you always, it's always like the Netflix 10, right? They put out 10 episodes of a thing and whatever. And then like a month later, I'm scrolling through Twitter, and then I see this tweet from Neil Gaiman. It's like, hey, what if there was 11 episodes? And I'm like, wait, what? What's he talking about?
Yeah, it was 2 weeks to the day too, because it came out August 5th, and then the 11th episode came out August 19th.
Yeah, I'm like, what's he talking about? 11 episodes? What does he mean? And there it was, a whole nother episode. And I totally get why. I totally understand why this is a separate episode. Like separated from the 10 that you see.
Okay.
Because like it's such a separate story. Like it's so disconnected from everything from everything else that's going on in the show that it would have been like such a deviation.
I gotcha. Yeah, the other ones seem like they were like not like sharp U-turns. They were just kind of like slight turns. It's like the first episode.
One I wouldn't say is even a U-turn. It's like a left into a forest.
Okay, because like the first episode kind of leads into the story of him getting his stuff. The wings, that's kind of its own thing, I guess. But I mean, it still kind of like gives some exposure, and then the whole Vortex storyline is kind of its own thing. But again, like
Dream. So the two stories in the 11th episode are Dream of a Thousand Cats, which is I in both of these you're gonna see Dream for less than 5 minutes.
Gotcha. But that's the thing with this too, right? Like you could have a whole season where he's barely in it. It could work.
Yeah, could. But yeah, so yeah, Dreams in both of these stories for less than 5 minutes.
Well, so
total.
Like so many of Netflix's shows that go 10 episodes, like you always watch me like, man, this could have been 4 episodes or 5, maybe 6 max. And they took that model here and said, well, yeah, they can. And we're going to do that and make 10 episodes. But it's really like episode 1 is a season. Episode 2 through 5 is a season. Episode 6 is its own season. Episode 7 through 10 is its own season. Like, this is like 4 seasons worth of, like,
kind of, yeah. I
entertainment.
mean, like you get, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Yeah, so there's Dream of a Thousand Cats and Calliope are the two stories at the end, which I was really excited for Calliope because I remember the Calliope story, and that, like, if you're like, well, Dream's kind of a nice guy, and Dream, you know, if you piss him off, he's not a nice guy.
I got that from this pretty heavy. And so, like, talking about Dream a little bit, like, I love his delivery on everything. I've been trying to, like, figure out how you could do it. Because it's very, like...
Like, even in the comics, like, you ever notice in the comics, when Dream talks, it's like the writing of his text is different.
Mm-hmm. It's all in black with white
else.
words. And it's all, like, kind of, like, very, like, just very harsh.
Yeah, and so like when you read the comic, you're like, well, how would they do his voice in a show?
Yeah, his is one, like, I've got one quote up. I'll give it a shot because I've been trying to figure it out because I feel like I can kind of do it. If dreams disappear, then so will humanity. That wasn't very good, but can you do it?
Not bad. I gotta think of a line. You have taught me something I have forgotten. I thank you, my sister.
Yours is very, like, British.
Well, he is British.
It doesn't sound British, though.
Well, yeah, but Neil Gaiman's British, so I just assume that all the characters are British.
And that's one of the I always forget he's British.
Plus,
I don't know why.
Isn't everybody in the show British?
Pretty much. If dreams... Because he kind of like, if dreams
I think the only
disappear.
American in that show is the Corinthian, right?
True, yeah.
That's a good point. Like, all the bad guys in that show are American. All the collectors were American.
You spill tea in the water one time.
The Corinthian was American. Well, I guess the mages were British. And the guy with the ruby, John was British. So there's that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. But that was more of corruption. That's kind of like the power corrupts kind of thing. But
yeah.
Again, like Richard, so I've got the first graphic novel I'm reading through. My comic shop's got like the whole series, so I'm going to go in and buy one whenever I pick up some comics.
Awesome.
I'm so glad that I got exposed to this. Wish I got exposed earlier, but great story, great show. Excited for a season 2. I'm pretty sure they're doing a season 2. I don't know how they could, but unless you have anything else you want to throw in, do you have any Richard's closing thoughts on our Sandman discussion?
So I read this comic a long time ago, and honestly, I kind of forgot that. I don't want to say I forgot it existed, but I definitely forgot how great a story it was, number one. And number two, I kind of forgot like the influence that I feel like it had on me. Because I don't know if you know this, Sean, I was a bit of like a, I don't want to call, I was not, I don't want to say I was not a goth kid, but I was definitely like leaning that way. And I would definitely attribute part of that to just the general aesthetic of Sandman and the story. I think I actually had a couple Sandman t-shirts. I don't remember. But I guess I failed to like it's been forever since I told people like, oh my God, like Sandman was such a fantastic book. Like you should definitely read it. It wasn't until like they were making the show that I was like, everyone needs to find everyone that hasn't seen this story needs to see this story. And so I'm glad they made it a show. I'm actually glad that it took as long as it took, because I think that if we would have seen this in the 90s or the 2000s, even the 20 teens, I don't think it would have been the show that it is, and I'm glad. I'm glad that it was it didn't get made until it deserved to get made well.
I agree 100%. I think it turned out great. It's going to build a whole new set of Sandman fans.
And we better get a season 2.
I don't see how they couldn't do a season 2. They're not really big on announcing that stuff early, but yeah. we got to get a season 2. But before the sand gets in our eyes and we sweet dreams, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. Visit our website, we're languageofbroance.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at languageofbro. Email us at bros@languageofbroance.com. And we always like to thank our these are the ones that help us sleep at night. They're the ones that bring us the sweetest dreams ever. That's our patrons, Wendy and Aaron.
May you sleep the sleep of the... Oh, metaphor kind of got away from me. I hope may you ever sleep well. That's all I got. That's not great.
May you collect all your... No, Richard, no, that's not what we want.
No, wait, no.
All right. Well, is there anything before I close her out?
No, I'm good, sir.
All right. Well, that's all the Bruins have for this show. I'm Sean.
And I'm Richard.
And remember, don't B-O-Y.
B-O-Y
not.
And Sweet Dreams from Sweet Dream.
My sister. No, that was bad too. I'll work on it. Well, what are dreams but dreams? I'm so sad.